You have got to keep the moisture out of your firewood. You have got to keep your firewood dry. You can spend a year preparing for this coming winter, cutting firewood, splitting firewood, and stacking firewood, and if you don't take the appropriate measures to keep it dry, all of your efforts are in vain. Here is the most important thing you need to know about keeping your firewood dry. If you've been following the channel, you know we've been cutting a lot of firewood. Most people think that covering your firewood on top with a tarp or a piece of plastic is the most important part of keeping it dry. No, that's the second most important part of keeping it dry. The most important part of keeping it dry is keeping it off the ground. Do not allow your firewood to make direct contact with the ground. You can use pallets like this to keep your firewood up off the ground so that when it rains and the ground becomes wet, your firewood doesn't absorb the moisture like a sponge, which it will if it's touching the ground. So that's one way, crates. Here's another way. If you've been following us, you know that we're getting ready to chop up about 6 or 8 oak trees that were recently taken out by a nor'easter. We've been chopping it up and we're getting ready to move a couple truckloads over here, so I've laid out my platform here, my base that I'm going to use to stack it, and I want to show you exactly what I did. Number one, you've got to get a plastic lining down on the ground. That's your primary line of defense against moisture, so that your wood does not suck the rainwater up or any moisture and become a sponge. Okay, now number two, even after you've put down that lining, I'm using poles here. This is a poplar limb, this is a pine limb. 2 little limbs that were brought down during the nor'easter recently that I could use as kindling, and we're using plenty of it for kindling, or I could cut it into lengths to stack my wood on. This gives us a secondary line of defense against moisture, because not only is the plastic protecting us from ground moisture, but any rainwater that gets collected on the plastic will not be absorbed through the wood because it's setting up, maybe 4 inches off the ground, okay, on the post. So, thirdly, I'm going to point out the ends of these posts. Make sure the ends of your posts do not extend past your plastic, because it's not going to do you any good to do all this work thinking you're prepared, only to have your ends sticking out over here onto the ground, sucking up moisture and bringing it into the entire pile. Now, we're facing east to west. That way is east, so when the sun comes up in the morning, it'll dry the wood out from the pores on this end. When the sun is back here in the west in the evening and afternoon, it'll dry the wood out from this way. Firewood does not dry directly this way. It dries out through the ends like little tiny miniature straws or air pockets, or like veins in our bodies, okay? So make sure you're facing east to west. You have 2 lines of defense up against the ground, okay? You don't believe me? Let me show you something. We've been working on this big giant red oak log that fell probably 20 years ago. Now the end looks dry here because I haven't been cutting on it for about a week, because I've been cutting my neighbor's trees that fell from the nor'easter. But if I were to slice off a fresh part of this, it would be so wet it's got to dry out for a couple months before we can even burn it. Why? Because when it was uprooted 20 years ago, okay, the base remained here, and the base is in a creek. Now, I haven't been out here cleaning this like I should be, so let me move this with my foot. And there you have water. See that? This is the water in the stream that feeds our pond. So this red oak, even though it's been down for 20 years, is still not dry because it's sucking up this moisture, because it's got direct contact with the ground. Now, if a red oak will do this after it's been grounded for 20 years, do you not think? I mean, even when I'm preparing my chunks here for the next cut, I get them up off the ground as best I can, because I know it's just going to be sucking up moisture until I get out here to work on them again. And now, once we get it stacked, we will roll this over on top of all of it. It's longer than it looks. It's rolled up and covered on top. On the bright sunny days, uncover it, let it dry out. If you got rain in the forecast, cover it up. You let them set like this, keep them up off the ground, keep the moisture away, Give it a year. It's March right now, beginning of March as of this recording. By this fall, when we start burning again for this coming winter, this stuff will be dry as a bone. If we stacked this on the ground or didn't have these lines of defense against the moisture, they'd be just as moist this fall when we started burning as they were when we cut them. So if you learned something from this video, you like our content, please subscribe to our channel. Go to the bottom right corner of your screen. See the little box says join us, hover over that and the red subscribe button will come up. Click on that to subscribe and check out more of our videos in the future from Homesteading Off the Grid.